So, Mary, how are you doing? This is, by the way,
Good.
this is the third
take.
time that we've restarted this.
And
I learn every time I do
did
this.
tell Cole to not fuck it up again.
She's telling me not.
I think
I'm not going to.
it's going to be okay this time.
This time we got it going. So this is Bearing the How, episode number 5, and I have Mary Andre on. She and I met at an IDW meetup, and we just hit it off. And I think there's a lot of stuff that we both agree on and that we feel compelled to talk about. You know, these idea, happiness, meaning, this idea, having these open conversations where it's civil and we want to just explore ideas. And that's why I wanted to have you on. And I would love to have you on a bunch of times. There's so many different topics we could go into. But Mary is an artist, so I'm going to put her Instagram in the show notes. Check out her stuff. It's really awesome stuff. And then she works in a law office, which we don't have to talk about if you don't want to. Like we talked about before, maybe somehow we'll relate it into what we're talking about.
Okay.
But, you know,
otherwise, it's actually a very fascinating profession. If you haven't heard of it, the law,
I think it is. That's why I asked you about it, because I've always been interested in law and like, especially with your philosophy on life, very interested how it relates. But let's just see what happens. Maybe we can just start with, like we have been talking about, happiness. Let's just start with, what does happiness mean to you?
Happiness means to me like a caricature of joyfulness. No, it doesn't.
That's what you don't want it to mean, right?
It means to me a state of appreciation and satisfaction with whatever is happening and to you at that moment. That to me is happiness. And it's something, when you talk about it that way, that can be sustained from moment to moment. And then you if you're able to do that, in my experience, since I've been getting better and better at this, you are able to hit more peaks of joy and less, despair.
Yeah. So,
which is everything that I want from my life and all that I want.
So you do kind of really have that mentality, and it sounds to me you do act it out, the moment to moment appreciation of whatever is happening to you in this moment. Figure out a way to appreciate it, which that's something I would love to ask you about. How do you?
It's being aware of your feelings, because I feel that our emotions are our guidance. And if you wake up and usually when you wake up, you're pretty clear until you start thinking about yesterday's shit. So what I did was, instead of letting that momentum start in the morning, I would stop it in any way that I could. Think about something else, put on music, put on whatever, to not have some kind of, oh, yesterday this happened and then that happened and what a shitty day. And so I got real good. I'm getting better, I should say, at identifying exactly what I'm feeling in a moment and working with it.
Yeah. I think that's the awareness. I really believe awareness is such an important part of life, and how to, is it Jordan Peterson that talks about, I don't remember who talks about it. Oh, it's Jocko Willink. I don't know if you listen to his podcast.
I have done.
Yeah, he talks about humility and being able to detach are the two most important aspects of being a leader, which I think you can relate being a leader into just anyone's life at any moment. It's kind of, you have to be, like, if you pursue the characteristics of a good leader, that's a lot of the stuff that you're talking about right now is part of the characteristics of a good leader. But anyway, I think awareness is like the most important thing. I think it comes before detachment, and it becomes before humility, because how can you detach if you're not first aware?
You have to be a master of yourself.
No.
And you have to be wanting to make your life happen instead of having it happen to you.
Yeah.
So there has to be a desire. And I think that most people do have a desire to achieve some sort of success, their idea of success.
Yeah.
And for me, like a really important way that I have been able to um, really start to use my emotions as a tool and be aware of where I'm at is meditation.
Talk about that.
I do that. I do it every day,
Hmm.
and it's taken me quite a while to get that chatter off,
Hmm.
and for
Monkey
any
mind.
appreciable amount of time. And it's still not a lot, but
Yeah.
it's much more than I was able to do at first.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, I feel, don't stick with it because it is a progressive exercise,
Yeah.
and you have to do it. You have to sit there and meditate and just let your thoughts spin out of control
And I think
day after day after day.
a lot of people have a misconception about meditation. They actually think meditation is somehow causing your mind to go blank, where you're no longer thinking. Which, uh, if that's your standard, there's no way you're ever going to meditate, right?
No.
Like it's
No,
not going to happen.
that is more something akin to death of the body.
Yeah, it's
to me.
I think, yeah, I mean, maybe. How do you have a certain style of meditation mantra? Do you have, what do you do
No, I
usually?
just like, in fact, again, with the definitions, I don't like the word meditation really all that much because it means like so many silly things like sitting in the lotus position,
Yeah. Right.
that is not what I do.
Hmm.
I changed my definition of it. I'm just going to sit here for 15 minutes with my eyes closed and listen to the noise on the computer or whatever, the air conditioner, something like that.
Yeah.
And
You can
that's what I do.
That's a good way to think about it. You can meditate at any moment, anytime. I know the job that I have is I work in a kitchen. I'm a production manager, and there's a lot of leadership aspects, but there's also an extremely routine, monotonous aspect of the actual kind of tasks that have to happen. And I learned, it took a long time, like you said, but that has become my meditation. When I get into those routines of monotonous 2-hour task over and over and over, it's an opportunity to meditate. It doesn't have to be sitting down in the lotus position. It's like,
Right.
it's, for me, meditation is, at least one way that I can put it, is about focus. It's learning to focus, because my mind goes off, and it goes off this way, it goes off that way. And the way I use meditation is bringing all that back down to a central point to focus on that. And then it goes away, and then it comes back,
I just want to say, I know what you mean. And yeah, I get into those meditative like states too, like doing my art. But there is nothing like sitting down and closing your eyes
Yeah.
and trying to quiet the chatter in your mind.
Yeah.
Because even when you're in those states, meditative flow, whatever
The
you
flow
want to
state.
call
Yeah,
them.
that's what a lot of people say.
Yeah. In my experience, it hasn't had the same impact.
Yeah.
for
Well,
me because
I meditate. I do also meditate, not long, and it's definitely, I'm not at all like Hunter. You met Hunter.
yeah,
He said he meditates for like an hour a day every day. I'm like, that would be amazing. I don't have the time to, but I would love to get to a place where I can do that. But I do meditate like 10 minutes 4 times a day. I actually sit here in this chair, and I usually end up falling asleep. Actually, like by the end of it,
That's
it
the
gets so
problem.
relaxed, and I fall asleep. But I do try to do what you're talking about, where I kind of, more than bringing my thoughts down to a focal point. Maybe that's a good thing to differentiate flow state and meditation. Maybe there is like a big difference in them.
I mean, I don't know about an hour. I've never done an hour. I do 15 to 20 minutes every day.
Yeah.
And I have done for several years now. And I just think it's not about focusing except on nothing, the sound.
You ever do focus on your breath? Anything like that?
Yeah, I can do that. But sometimes it's hard to do that when you're first starting out because you start being aware of your breath, and then you start hyperventilating.
Yeah.
It doesn't work out very well.
For sure.
But I do feel that it's important to try to focus on something and turn off the chatter. And as soon it's going to start up, but as soon as you are aware again that you're letting all these thoughts flow through your mind, you think, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be listening to the sound or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
So
and
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Like, do you have, like, let's just say you're at work and something happens that's just sucks. Some person you encounter throws you off completely. Do you have a thought pattern or a way to go kind of to that similar meditative state when you're in your just kind of normal day-to-day life where you're like, do you have some like way to just to have that moment of, oh, this is time, detach, this is time, let's bring this back? Because that's the problem, right? Most people, something happens and they get into the maze, which is what I call it, but the momentum, they get into it. Most people aren't even aware of like what's happening to them, the psychology of the momentum of your thoughts, you know.
What I think happens when you do, I mean, I'm speaking for myself. When I started this meditation and started doing it every day and stuck with it, because even at the beginning, you should be aware you're probably not going to actually meditate for quite a while. You're going to be having these thoughts go on. So it took me a good year before I actually had some few like spaces in between the chatter.
Gotcha.
That's meditation to me. And over time that I've been meditating, I don't go into a meditative state when I'm approached with a challenge at work or wherever, but I have more reserves, I guess is one way to put it, to step back and to look at the situation holistically,
Gotcha.
where I'm a player in it and I'm not the focus of everything.
Yeah.
It's not all about me. These are other people here involved too. So I feel it gives me better opportunity to take other people's thoughts and feelings into consideration and try to do what is best in the moment for all of us.
I mean, I think that's an amazing, I mean, that's part of one of the messages that I want to talk about is that, because I think that is so many people just don't understand that idea. It's an abstract idea. You can get into the psychology of it and everything of this detachment and this objective viewing of your own life. And, you know, it's hard too. It is hard. You know, it takes a long time. And a lot of people victim is like it's a harsh word, right? Like when I say people are victims, it's a really harsh way to put it. There's a better way to say it. I don't know the best maybe way to describe it, but I'm not talking, when I say like people are victims, I'm not meaning like you're a victim of some, physical act or something harsh. I'm saying the victim mentality is when you don't believe you have control over even your emotions, even your thoughts. It's and most people day to day they're in that mentality, that victim mentality. It doesn't have to be this extreme where you're protesting and you're like, I'm a victim. It's not that. It's like your day to day life.
Yeah. It's excessive subjectivity.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. That's a really good way to put it.
And when I have had these interactions, wherever there's a challenge, when you are able to keep your head and everything comes out, you all go through this shit together, whatever it may be, and you come out the other end and everything is like, okay, that could have gotten really bad. Mm-hmm. But actually, it turned out really well.
Yeah. Well, sounds like you're a leader. That's what you do as a leader. That's what leaders do, is exactly what you're talking about.
Well, I don't know about that. That's a lot of responsibility. I'll take personal responsibility.
Yeah.
But I do feel it is one of the primary ways that we can make a change.
Yeah.
Like in the world.
I mean, that philosophy is you taking individual responsibility. The way that I see it from like us talking, and if I think about it, don't know the details of your work or anything, but you are a leader, not in terms of maybe you have the status and the management, whatever responsibilities, but you're a leader because you set the example. You're setting a really good example of how you can manage not super specific things like, oh, these tasks need to get done, but you're just setting a good example, and people look up to that. Even if they're not aware of it, people admire that and look up to that quality.
And they also feel, and this is very important, that you care.
Yeah.
A lot of what feeds the victim lack of personal responsibility mentality is the fact that people feel like no one cares.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because this is something that I every day almost have this experience with, that notion of someone, just an example, someone comes into work and I can tell, we've talked about like being intuitive and you can feel someone's like emotions, but someone comes in and you can tell they're in the victim mentality, which means you can tell that they are, if someone comes into work before they even say anything and they have that kind of cold look and their shoulders down, and you can just tell when someone's not feeling great, it's very easy to immediately start having those thoughts of, like, from my perspective or from the other people's perspective, to start having those thoughts of, he's coming in again today, like it's gonna be a bad day, he's gonna have that kind of egotistical perspective, like, can't he just come in and be an adult and be responsible? Like, why does he have to? He has a job, it's his responsibility. Like, those are the thoughts that you can easily start to have. And like you were just saying, I've noticed that all it takes is me going up to that person and saying, how are you doing today? Is there anything I can do for you to help? And that, it's like, most of the time, that's it. It just takes that little bit of compassion or empathy or whatever you want to call it. And I think that's such an issue with a lot of people, even not even talking about leadership or anything like that, but it's that tribal mentality, right? The moment you see someone in the victim mentality, you shrug them off, like, oh, I don't want to deal with that person.
Fuck you.
Exactly. Yeah. You're like,
it's very easy to default to that.
It's crazy because, this is my opinion, I'd love to know what you think, but it seems like the reason that the victim mentality is such an unattractive thing is because it's a very selfish philosophy. Like, when you're in the victim mentality, you're being a selfish person, right?
Well, you're not, kind of. I think that we're all selfish. We are all here to pursue our self-interest.
Yeah.
If that's not selfishness, then I'm not sure what is.
Well, I mean, I guess, like, maybe more specifically, when you're in the victim mentality, it's selfish because you are not taking any steps to try to have compassion for anyone around you.
That's because, are we recording?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going to just be double checking everything and making sure. Sorry. Yeah,
good.
It's good.
Good call.
Yeah. It's actually everything. I like having my computer here. It's way better. So thank you for being patient.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, I feel everyone is where they're at. They just are. And you have to take them where they're at. And because I do care about everybody.
Cool issue. We're back.
Slides.
Mary, you're so patient with me. You're a true example of everything we're talking about, how patient you're being with me.
Gee, thanks.
Thank you. We were just talking about, like, how easy it is to be, when you see someone in a victim mentality or having that mentality, how easy it is to not be compassionate, I guess is the best way to put it. It's very easy that tribal, instinctive, kind of primitive mentality of not being compassionate. I think it's a huge problem. It is a
huge problem. Yeah. And in fact, we were talking about selfishness, and it is for selfish reasons that I wanted to overcome that in my own life. Because I want a better world. I want to live in a better world. In order to do that, I'm going to have to do something to reach out to these people who I identify as less than. They're victims. They're whatever, not good enough.
Yeah. And just to quickly ask about that, you think that it's selfish? You think that that's selfish to want to make the world a better place? I don't think that that's selfish.
It's
It's selfish because
It's total self-interest.
yeah,
I want to make the world a better place for me.
for you. But I mean,
And it just so happens it helps a lot of other people too.
yeah,
And I do see it in my own circle.
yeah,
Like I feel like, you know, a person that I'm dealing with who I have had a series of challenges with, you know, we kind of keep things going on this upper trajectory and things get better. And that's when you reach out and you try and meet them where they're at instead of uh, throwing up a defense.
mm, mm. I mean, I guess that's one of those other things. Like selfish has this negative connotation. I guess it's true. Like I just don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that's a really good thing. That's something that you aim for. I mean, we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, the idea of Christianity and Jesus Christ, like the metaphorical significance of the ultimate sacrifice of Jesus. And that's like what you're talking about, this idea, at least from my, like the way that I see it is you sacrifice your victimhood to help someone else with their victimhood, which is like the ultimate. That's like what Jesus Christ symbolized. I think there's this misconception of Jesus being this guy who died so we could sin. He died on the cross so we could be forgiven for our sins. I think it's more like, wait a minute, he was like setting the example at a high level of how we can act, which is I have to sacrifice my ego. I have to sacrifice my victimhood to help other people with theirs. There isn't another way to do it. If you don't do that, you're going to constantly be a victim. You're going to constantly allow yourself to be trapped in that momentum, in the maze. And it sounds like some ultimate good thing, but it's like you're saying, it is selfish in terms that, I guess, because it's a self-interest thing you're doing, but it is the best thing. I mean, I think that's, how else can you, what else are you going to do? You know, are you going to just constantly be a victim and constantly be, you know, not appreciating other people in their victimhood? I mean, it's like,
it's not a fun way to live.
yeah.
And I'm all about having a fun life.
Yeah.
Going back to the part where
yeah, the happiness.
This has probably not been recorded, but to actually have a good, enjoyable, satisfactory, happy, fun life.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would still want to like dig in with that idea. Like I want to push back on it to be devil's advocate with it. But that, like, there is this big divide with like the very woo-woo hippie sounding people that are like, just be happy in every moment, like law of attraction. I'm not judging, but there is this divide with those people because it seems like, and from my perspective too, like I can intellectually understand the idea of happiness, being happy in every moment, appreciating in every moment. But there comes a time, there comes a day where all that goes out the window. It just goes out the window. Something very horrible happens. It goes out the window. The intellectual aspect of understanding it.
Window,
I know, I'm just saying that I think that's what most people experience. They're like into it. They love listening to all the motivational self-help. They read the books. They like, you know, people like Abraham Hicks or whoever, and they love it and it's amazing. But then they have that day where like something extremely detrimental happens and it just goes out the window. It doesn't stick in that moment where they're experiencing something truly harsh. Like it just goes out the window. They can't make that choice. They can't think of it. They can't think of wait a minute, this moment is the most important moment for me to have this mentality. It's very hard to have that perspective when you're going through a very rough time. And I think that's an issue with all this stuff is it sounds awesome. It sounds cool. Yeah. And like if I'm having a good day and nothing hard is happening, yeah, I can have appreciation. I can have compassion. But the moment that something truly harsh happens, like even, I mean, you could go as far down the rabbit hole with negativity as you want. Like someone robs your bank account, someone, you know, does some like physically abuses you, or you get hit by a car and you end up in the hospital. Like those moments, for most people goes out the window. They don't even they feel like they don't even have any control. All of these ideas just go out the window.
Right.
And that's the issue of that. I'm trying to address that because I do think you have the choice.
Exactly.
But how can you really?
You have to be. It does require some vigilance and some dedication. It's there is going with the flow, and then there's being unaware.
No.
They're two different things. You can be with the flow, but you've got to be aware of your part in it.
Yeah.
It's the detachment thing again.
Yeah.
And it takes practice and it takes meditation.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
It really did take that. When I look back and I have all those negative things, some of those things that you were saying, and we all do, someone dies, this happens, some other fucked up thing happens. And you use those periods as it's almost like it's like an opportunity for very dynamic change. And because I have always had an expectation of having a good life, I've always felt like it was my duty to find a way to make this into a positive of some sort, even if it's a negative.
Yeah. I mean, that is such a, I agree with you. This is, I 100% agree with you that is the way, that is the mentality to try to have. I guess the question and what I like to try to dig into is like how, like the whole theme of the podcast, how and why. It like you can understand it intellectually, but how do you actually do it? Especially for people who maybe are a lot younger and haven't had a lot of bad experiences, or for people that are in the middle of an extremely bad situation. It's very hard to step outside of that perspective and think. You can even think of it like, well, 10 years from now, where am I going to be? Technical issue again. We're back. Next podcast. Big goal, get better mics or figure out a way to correct the software. If there's anyone out there, a fan of this podcast, hit me up in LA, help me get this settled. I have this issue. These mics are cracking. I've tried everything. It's not working. Anyway, sorry.
They're working now.
They're working now. It's good. What was I saying? Just how that's what Jordan Peterson did for me. I mean, he was the spark that made me realize this kind of philosophy, whatever you want to call it. He was the spark that made me realize you can look at your life as a roller coaster game that you can step outside of and look down on. You can look at your life like that. And the very negative, bad moments, you can look at them as opportunities to grow. Like, you're going to have insane growth in this moment.
Right.
But it took me a year of and I'm not perfect. Every day I have some issue, but it took like a year of swaying and depression, anxiety, understanding it, not understanding it, swaying back and forth to kind of finally actually start acting it out. And it's just, this is part of the message. How is there some way to articulate this, or is there some meditation, some routine that can help people actually understand it? There are a lot of people that don't even want to understand it.
That is the problem.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to try to tell someone, well, this is going to work for you, so do this.
Yeah.
It's just it's not going to happen. They're not going to listen to you. I think that all you can really do is be an example, be a good example, so that when people see you, they're like, well, that person, has figured out.
Yeah.
And I bet, everything in her life is really glowing. Well, no, it has not been really glowing in my life. But it is now.
Yeah.
Because I made a conscious decision that this is the way I want to live. This is the way I was born to live, which was to be happy, satisfied, and appreciating in the moment.
Yeah.
And doing art really, really helps a lot. But one thing that I do think that we can do more of is this meditation in schools.
Mm.
I can't remember who. I know that I think that David Lynch with the TM Society.
Yeah. David Lynch is big on the transcendental
They've
meditation.
done a lot of getting kids on meditation, and someone else too. I can't remember. Someone connected to the IDW.
Mm. I mean, Sam Harris is big on
Oh,
meditation.
maybe it's his wife.
Yeah.
The
the teaching? I think so.
I think it is. You're right.
About that.
Yeah, it is Sam Harris's wife.
And he has his app. He has his app now. Waking up or whatever
and
it's called.
He's a huge proponent, and I just can't say enough to get your head straight and effectuate the kinds of things you want to see in the world within yourself.
Yeah.
So that you can be this example that other people can see and follow, and they'll ask you. And
it's like I was saying, like it's like, I mean, there's so many ways you can interpret it. Like we were talking about Christianity a little bit, that to me, I feel like that's why there's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of dogma that has been associated with it. But I feel like if you kind of think about it more psychologically, that is why Christianity has been so prevalent and is still around after thousands of years, is because that what you're talking about is kind of the example that Jesus set. That's what he did. He came down to set that example. And there's scriptures. I can't remember. I was just watching this video on it, but there's scriptures that they're just now digging up and finding that talk specifically about kind of these types of things. Like you can make the choice. Like it says things like, when you pray, you have to feel like your prayer has already been answered before you pray, which is like, appreciation in the moment, like all that. And then leadership, I think it is leadership. Like you're being a leader, but you're not being like a specific leader for some specific thing. You're being a leader in general for anyone that you might encounter. Like that's what that is. And I think, I think maybe just having these types of these conversations is how we can keep spreading it, just having conversations like this. I just have to address this. This podcast, it's never happened. There's been constant cracking. I'm just
very proud to be a participant.
Yeah, in this. We're going to, I mean, it's everything happens for a reason. You are setting an example for me of patience. Like you have not at all gotten annoyed with this, and you're making me feel better and more, controlled with trying to do this right now. You're
like I told you, like in my own experience with trying to record music. Yeah. You have no idea.
I mean, I'm glad you understand. Anyway, I think just this whole idea of the leadership, it's like life leadership. It's like, you can think of it in a cheesy way, cliche, but that's what it is. It's like, it is that idea of it's like, you can also put it as you get to make a choice, right? That's what it is. It comes down to, how am I going to choose to perceive this? And people will argue, well, what if my son gets murdered in that moment? If my son gets murdered, you're going to sit here and tell me that I can not be a victim and I can, just choose to feel happy in that moment? That's an argument that I'm sure many people say is, all this goes out the window if something very detrimental happens like that, and that's one of those moments where I would say Jordan Peterson comes in, and that's where he puts the meaning of, in that moment, it's more about the meaning rather than the happiness, because it's going to be very hard to feel happy when something like that happens, but you can get through it because of the meaning.
Yet there are many, many, many stories of parents forgiving the killers of their children and how they have moved on, and not in some kind of saccharine way where it's bullshit, but you can see they have processed and really thought about it. Yeah. Instead of just allowing, the momentum of grief to take over, which I'm sure they went through plenty of that as well. But it does happen often. Yeah. I guess it's, it is choice, but it's also, reaching out and making every interaction that you have with everybody like a rich experience. Yeah. And no matter how, shallow or how fast, you're going to be dealing with, like even just saying hello to someone that you're passing on the sidewalk.
Yeah,
And
we've talked about that a lot. I think that's a super important practice. I guess you could say it is a conscious practice of every person you meet, look them in the eye and really give them attention and treat them like they are valuable people. It's
mhm.
like it's definitely a choice that you make even just to do that, but it is definitely part of it for sure. You could call that leadership again, just leadership in your day-to-day life
It,
with
it's,
everyone,
it
you
is the
know.
change.
Yeah.
It is a change. And because very few people do it.
Yeah.
But when you do it, that person is going to be so much more likely to do it to the next
Yeah,
person.
very true.
It's like, you've had the experience, I'm sure, driving and you let someone in, and the next thing you know, someone's letting you in.
Yeah,
And
very true. Yeah.
tends to build on a momentum.
You just made me think of something bringing up driving. What do you think what is up with road rage? Why do people in their cars act like Neanderthals when
Well, you
someone
know
cuts them
what?
off?
I actually don't drive. I have driven, but I haven't
Gotcha.
for a very, very long time. But I think it's sort of like the same thing as an internet troll, because you're not right face to face with that person. Yeah, maybe you can see them, but you're still safe in your car.
Yeah,
You
you're
have this box
protected,
around
right?
you,
Yeah.
and it's not until you guys get out of the car and start going at it that
Yeah.
it becomes a huge
Yeah, and
problem.
that's I think I was thinking about this earlier today. I was just thinking about road rage. I was trying to think about how road rage is a really good example of the tribal mentality that we have as humans, because it happens all the time and it's a big problem. Traffic and
Yeah,
accidents, it's like,
I
you
have
know.
not actually witnessed any road rage.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean, I don't drive, but I do take a lot of
yeah,
Ubers.
well, there's I guess there's there's like two levels of road rage. There's the road rage where, and this does happen, I mean, it happens way more frequently than it should, but there's the road rage where something will happen and then that person will like follow the person and get out of the car and try to fight them. Or there's been people that murder other people because of like simply some thing. But the road rage
Right.
I'm talking about is more what you don't see, which is just how they react just to themselves in their car. Like people, like if you get cut off, that immediate first reaction is fuck that person.
Right.
Why the fuck did that person just cut me off? And it's like that is the tribal mentality. You're immediately, like instinctually, going to the place of fuck that person. I don't care if they're in a rush or they're trying to do something or what they're doing. I don't care if they've been trying to get in for 3 minutes and no one has let them get in. Fuck them. They made me feel uncomfortable. It's like that immediate,
Well,
you know.
that's like one of those things, where you really have to recognize your trigger.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it's a question again of momentum. Uh, do you really want to go down that road, or are you going to just let this slide?
Yeah. I mean,
And it'll be within 60 seconds, it will have attained an insignificance that it never even happened.
yeah, I mean, road rage is a funny example. It is funny, like to use road rage, but it just does relate to everything we're talking about. But I'll be driving with a friend, or I'll be in the passenger seat, they'll be driving, and it's like this. It is weird that something will happen and they just immediately go to that plate. Like even flipping someone off and saying "fuck them," what an asshole, and then like 10 seconds later, it's almost like it didn't happen. But it's weird that initial reaction. It almost it's like our lizard brain, that primitive limbic part of our brain, like kind of popping out for a moment. But I have gotten to that place where it just doesn't even faze me. Like I just don't care. I let people in as much as I can. Like, but I see it all the time. Anyway, I don't know why. I was just thinking about it earlier, that it's like a good example of how quickly we go to our tribal mentalities, and it relates to everything, all this political stuff. That's what that is, right? It's all that tribal mentality. It all is about,
Well, everybody is just doing what everybody else is doing.
yeah,
That's what it is.
yeah,
Okay, tit for tat.
yeah.
You
Well,
you
yeah,
did this, and I'm going to flip you off,
yeah,
and we're going to probably spend the rest of our day on this track, and then I'm
Yeah.
going to go home, and then I'm going to watch TV for 2-3 hours and drink a 6-pack or something. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Whatever,
mean,
whatever people do.
tit for tat, that's a good way to think about it too. Like,
It's just
you know,
kind of like a cycle of unhappiness and dis-ease.
yeah.
You know.
I mean, this is why I think this stuff is so important to talk about, because there's a lot of that going on right now. There's a lot of people having a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of people going through depressions, and why that is, like, why is it happening so much? And I want to get someone on that has done more research and talked about this, or anyone that might know more about it. But I do, and like, I do want to look into more the idea of the internet, social media, pornography being directly related to the levels of depression and anxiety right now. There's a correlation there, I think, my opinion, not an expert, but I want to know more about that. I really want to know more about it, because it definitely seems correlated, right?
I completely
Media,
agree.
like you're saying, media for sure too. All that. It's like, and a lot of people don't talk about it. A lot of people don't want to talk about how social media, and I've experienced it firsthand. I've had friends that have experienced, but social media can be very detrimental. And you use that to get your validation and approval in life, which a lot of people are doing it.
Yes, they do.
And
it's very unfortunate.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And I'm just curious, like, I just want to explore, like, why is that happening? What is the disconnect there? What is that disconnect? Why don't people not see that? Or what do
because
people,
it's happening too fast for us to adapt.
Well, very true.
When you look at civilized human history, changes happen in such a gradual and incremental way that people had plenty of time to adapt.
Yeah.
And even in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, that was enough. I mean, that really threw a lot of people for a loop.
Yeah.
But we're on that times 100 million now.
Yeah.
The changes that we're going through, and in a way, to look at things from a larger perspective, we're dealing with this so that we can make a big leap in our development as a species.
That's a good way to think about it. I've heard, like, Joe Rogan talk. I forgot who he talked about this to, but they did talk about it. It is all due to how rapidly it's happening. Makes perfect sense, right? I mean, and do you think, are you optimistic?
Yes.
Are you, like, optimistic about the future?
Yes.
Where we're going? What about, like, artificial intelligence? What do you think about all this artificial intelligence talk with people losing jobs and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I have some ideas about how to fix that, actually, but
like what? Curious.
Well, it has to do with having people return to doing things that are more interesting than. We're still going to have a lot of menial shit to do, but like more art.
Yeah.
If they're going to have a billionaire class, they're going to want art.
Yeah.
They're going to want great art.
Yeah. Art is always going to be around.
And so having I'm thinking like almost like medieval guilds. I'm sure there's someone who's going to crucify me for that, but just artisans.
Yeah. What about people? I mean, just to dive into this, it's interesting. Like, I think I agree. I think, like, it does seem like artificial intelligence, it for sure isn't at this level yet, and it seems like it's going to be a long time. But artificial intelligence, there's a lot of stuff that it can't do that is like what you're talking about. Almost, there are things that not only is it very unique to consciousness and the human awareness to do them, but it also, like, fulfills us in a different way than just doing a routine, mundane job. But what about people that aren't artistic and that they're way more, I don't want to put labels, but people that are just way more kind of
but
pragmatic.
How do you know?
Yeah.
Until you try.
Yeah.
And the same with trying to visualize the way AI is going to look at our lives. It's really not possible.
Yeah, that's very true.
It really isn't. It's like, you may as well try to, come up with the new theory of relativity overnight or something.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen.
No.
And
what do you think about consciousness and like artificial intelligence? This is obviously I'm very interested in just what is consciousness. I think that's, to me, I think consciousness is an extremely interesting idea. It's so mysterious. We don't know. But that's one thing that I often think about with artificial intelligence is, will we ever be able to create consciousness in artificial intelligence? Like we don't even know what consciousness is exactly. There's a lot of questions, but to me, it seems like...
will we be able to create machines that access consciousness?
I guess, yeah.
To me,
you can put it that way.
Is just
it
is the energy that animates us and everything, that created everything, that keeps the planet spinning.
You think... I want to pick your brain on this, because I've been listening to people talk about consciousness, and there are a lot of physicists talking about simulation theory, and to me, you can directly relate simulation theory to consciousness. And there's this one guy in specific, Tom Campbell. Have you ever heard of him?
No.
Oh, you would like him, I think. But he talks about simulation theory, and he talks about it in a pretty scientific way. But he talks about consciousness, and his idea is that consciousness is almost like the programmer, and the universe is like the computer, and human beings are like avatars. Consciousness is the fundamental everything. It's the fundamental reality. Everything is existing within consciousness. And I'm curious about it, because
I wonder how he separates the universe out from consciousness.
Well, that's
interesting.
It's interesting, but that's his idea, is like, and I'm butchering, you guys can look into him if you're interested, on very, very, very theoretical ideas about consciousness. But that's the idea, is consciousness is like you said, like the fundamental reality that's driving the creation of everything. And the universe, like maybe the space-time, like if you think about it more like matter and particles and atoms, the universe is just the program running the data that's producing what we experience with our five senses.
Not
if
sure
that
I'm
makes
buying
sense.
That.
Yeah, I mean it's like,
for me,
interesting.
it's integrated.
But do you think consciousness is like the fundamental reality, that we exist within consciousness? And because a lot of people think our brains produce consciousness, that it isn't fundamental, that we just, it's something that it's a consequence of evolution and biology. That's what consciousness is. And then there are people like, no, that's not.
I don't think that. I think that, I don't have a lot of fancy terms to, I'm not a physicist.
Yeah, me either, by the way.
But,
at all.
Yeah, no, he is really. It's just an energy. It is just a benevolent, I believe, energy that, or at best, or at worst, neutral.
Yeah.
That has just created. It is the simulator. Or if you want to, put it that way.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's part of us, and it imbued us as we came into these bodies.
Yeah.
And it will leave these bodies when these bodies are done.
Yeah. So you think like you think consciousness is like, when we're born, a little piece of consciousness comes down, and we exist as a little piece of consciousness, and when we die, the consciousness goes back into the oneness, or whatever. No, I think
it's sort of just like swirling through like an ocean. And
it's interesting. I love talking about it. I think about it all the time. Like, it's such a mysterious question. science doesn't have answers for consciousness.
We will
it's
never
like the
know.
one thing, right? Like there really are no answers to what,
Obviously, whatever that is, it doesn't want us to know, or we would know.
Yeah. And it just seems to me, like, once again, I'm not an expert on all. And if anyone is an expert and wants to come on here and tell me like that I'm wrong completely, I would love that. But it seems like it's impossible to understand consciousness because it's outside of us. It's like we're inside of it. So how can we?
No, it's inside of us.
Or that too. I mean, I guess you could think that too. But if it's inside us, then why are we all conscious? Isn't it? It's still connected in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Like I said, I just feel like it's in this room. It's in everything, and it's coming through us as long as we're.
As soon as he started talking about God, it started cracking in. Yeah,
That's because that's a sign.
Do you have? I'm just curious if you have like, I mean, would you consider yourself religious? How do you define religion?
Definitely not religious. I was raised in a Catholic family.
Gotcha.
And it just didn't take with me. I could not get with the program. No. I didn't believe it. I thought it was ridiculous.
But what about how you
I hated the Bible.
Yeah.
I hated it. I thought it was the most boring thing on earth.
Yeah, I think a lot of people.
And it wasn't until I was much older that I started to appreciate, the lessons and the examples.
Gotcha. Yeah.
That are in the Bible.
Well, I just have this question. I like to ask this question, but I don't know the exact definition of religion. I'll look it up. But wouldn't you think that like your belief that consciousness is God is like a religious belief?
Well, no, because religion implies dogma. I mean, that's a very vague belief that I expressed. It's
because here's a couple definitions. The first one is the belief in and worship of superhuman controlling power, especially personal God or gods, and then a particular system of faith and worship, and then a pursuit or interest to which someone ascribes supreme importance. That's pretty vague, that last one.
That last one is probably the closest.
It's a cool thing to think about. I mean, and I think it's why Jordan Peterson often says to like Sam Harris, you don't call yourself religious, but you act as if you're religious. Because like if you're thinking about that being the definition, a pursuit or interest to which someone ascribes supreme importance, then any value that you have is technically.
Does he use the word religious, or does he say that you exhibit Judeo-Christian values?
I don't think he says. Oh, he does say that, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
I think he does say that.
And I think that's when it dawned on me that there was something, desirable after all of my rejection of the Catholic. Yeah. Sorry for the Catholics.
No, I think I just want to say this while we're doing this. I want to do another podcast with you for sure. Like, I'll get all this stuff figured out. I need to get some better equipment. That's something I would love to talk about is like how like that journey from rejecting religion, and you don't consider yourself religious, but you know the value. It seems like you have like an understanding of the value. I'm curious. We don't have too much time, but is there anything you want to say on that just before we go? Like,
well, I just have come to appreciate it for its value and positive effect.
Yeah.
In this world.
Yeah.
Which I failed to notice as a child.
Yeah. Well, let's end it there, and then let's pick it up the next podcast we do there. I'm actually going to church for the first time tonight.
Okay.
So I will have, and I'm approaching it with a very open mind, but more from that perspective, like the value and the community of it. But anyway, thank you so much for coming on. And again, I'm sorry about the technical issues.
Thanks,
you have been extremely patient with me, and you've taught me a lot just with how patient you've been, how I need to be with this stuff. So thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you. I'll see you next time.
Okay.